Hey guys, this is Gene Jensen, and I'm going to do a video today that I've been wanting to do for a long time. It is an ultra finesse technique, great for summertime, tough fishing, bottoms that you anyway, bottoms that you want to that you kind of want to keep your line off of, like zebra mussels, things like that you guys have to deal with up north. And it's called the Neko Rig. All right, so let's talk about how to rig this worm. The things you need to rig it with are a straight tail worm. You can even use a creature bait on this if you want to. You can wacky rig or Neko rig just about anything. I prefer, when the bite is really tough, just a straight tail worm. This is a Biospawn plasma tail. I love the plasma tail because the tail itself gives you a lot more action than most other straight tail worms, with that nice taper tail and that little, I don't know what they call it, but anyway, the tail itself gives you a lot more action. I use a wacky rig tool with an O-ring. I have smaller O-rings that are just for this technique, just for small straight tail worms. And then the different weights that you can use, and I think I just lost one. Nope, there it is. You can use a what's called a worm weight, which is a head weight, and I'll show you how to put it in the worm here in just a minute, or a nail weight. And another thing I used to use are the big steel coat hangers. I'd cut little pieces off of the coat hangers, but they really don't give you enough weight to be able to do this effectively. So lead or tungsten is probably the best, and my favorite one is the worm weight. Now the hook, you can use your standard wacky hook, weedless wacky hook, anything else. I use the same hooks that I use for wacky rigging, and those are these are called Hayabusa hooks or something like that. It's a weedless hook that I use for wacky rigging. Works really good for just about anything like this, any ultra finesse technique. All right, so what I rig it on is I rig it on a medium light action spinning rod, 15-pound braided line and or braided main line. And I have a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader connected with an FG knot. I'll get into why I use braided line to a leader in another video. But 6-pound test fluorocarbon is probably my favorite finesse weight or breakage strength, my favorite finesse line. It's hard for the fish to see. The smaller the line, the less visible it is, and it's just, you get the most action out of your worm with this. So you tie on the hook. No weight, no anything else, just tie the hook on. I use an improved clinch knot. You can use a Palomar too. I don't like using Palomar with fluorocarbon because when I tighten a Palomar knot down, it tends to burn the fluorocarbon and it breaks real easy. So I use a very carefully tied improved clinch knot. And I cinch it down with I push the knot down with my fingers as I'm pulling it tight, so I'm not burning the line. Okay, just tie the hook on. Now the key to this rig actually is the worm weight. Now I do not have my lighter in my box for some reason. Maybe one of my kids took it out, but typically I will heat the end of this this weight up. I'll hold it in some pliers, and I'll take the lighter and I'll heat up the end that's going into the worm, and then I'll put it into the worm. What that does is it melts the worm as it's going in, and then the worm will cool, and it basically molds itself around the worm weight. It just stays in a whole lot better than if you use super glue or anything else. But you know, if you don't have a lighter, use some super glue. But you put your worm weight or your nail weight into the head of the worm, so it is weighted right there on the head. And you take your hook. Did I put the? No, I didn't. I did not put the wacky ring on there. Now the wacky ring, it's an O-ring. It's a rubber O-ring, and I use a small one, and I go about maybe 2.5 inches up the worm, and I slide that right off of it, just like that. Okay. I don't want it too close to the weight, and I don't want it too close to the tail. You know, I just kind of want it about like that, about 1/3 of the way up. Then here's the key. Man, I got a piece of that line in my mouth. Here's the key. You don't hook it down, okay? You don't take and put your, you know, point tip down and have the eye of your hook up towards the tail. You do it upside down. You come, see if I can show this to you. Come up. You want to put that tip in there real deep. You got to look at, see the shank of this hook. See how it is. See how it's got that long. See if I can get you guys to see that. It's got that long section in it right there. I want that whole section to be buried in that worm. So I'm going to go deep in that worm, or not too deep, but I'm going to go a long ways in that worm and I'm going to pull it back out. Okay, and that's how it looks right there. You see that? Now these do get hung up more than the ones that have the little loop that goes in underneath the eye of the hook, or underneath the tip of the hook. And those are the ones that are really, you know, those are the ones I would use in thick cover. I just don't like them because I don't get decent hook sets with them. This one I get a really good hook set with. But anyway, that's the way you rig it. And now let's talk about how to fish it and when and where and, you know, all the other crazy things that I talk about. All right, so what this is a tight line technique. You do not want to let your line go slack. You let it sink to the bottom on a slack line, which is fine. But then when you're working it, you want to basically keep reeling and shake it, and reeling and shake it is all you do. You just keep reeling. And you want to keep your line fairly tight, at least a semi-slack line. Don't let slack get into it. The object is to keep that hook up off the bottom. So you don't want it to sink. Really slow. And just make sure it's on the bottom. That's all you got to do. It's kind of odd. It's kind of a hard, you know, hard to do that when you're used to fishing like a shaky head or something like that. But as long as you remember to keep at least a good tight bow in your line, you're doing just fine. Now the kind of areas you can fish this thing are pretty much endless. I mean, you can fish it in the grass. It all depends on what kind of hook you're using though. I mean, if you want to use one of those, you know, the weedless wacky hooks or something like that, you really got to be somewhat cautious as to what you throw it into if you're not using one of those. So you want to, you know, you can fish brush. I like to fish hard bottom, you know, rocky points, anything really. So there is no limit to where you can fish this. You're going to get it hung up every once in a while, but it's fairly weedless. And it catches fish. It is a phenomenal bait when the bite's really tough. All right, so one of the things that you can do in order to be able to slow way down with this thing is, remember, it's a tight line technique. So as long as you keep that line tight, that worm will stay somewhat upright and that hook will stay off the bottom. And so I let it sink down to the bottom, and if I want to just hold it still, I really try to keep that line as tight as I can. I'm lifting my rod right now because my boat's drifting towards the bait. But you just kind of keep your line tight, and it'll keep that hook up off the bottom and keep that worm weight on the bottom. And then you can just sit there and you can just barely shake it, and that little tail on that plasma tail just goes, it just goes crazy. I'm just hoping I can catch a fish in the next 5 minutes. There's a thunderstorm moving in that is huge. It's still about 15-20 minutes away from where I'm gonna have to get out of here. So if I don't catch a fish in this video, I apologize. I know for sure if I spend a little bit of time out here before making this video and got out a little bit earlier, but I had to take my kids to school, I had a little bit more time. But I ain't giving up yet. Man, had to have been a bluegill. That's a fish right there. Now I want you to notice how I set the hook, and hopefully he didn't break me off in these rocks, but it wasn't one of those big hook sets. It was just tightened up. It's an open, thin wire hook. So I didn't have to set the hook very hard. And when the bite is tough, this is an outstanding rig. Not a big fish, but dang, it's a fish. Whew, he ate it deep too. All right, let me get that hook out real quick before he bleeds all over my boat. Sorry, had to get him in the water before he bled to death. It happens. They take it deep a lot of times, and it doesn't take them long. Some of the other lures, the other baits that you can use with the Neko Rig are, you know, Senkos, anything you would wacky rig, even creature baits you can put on it, anything. I mean, really any soft plastic of small to medium size, you can Neko Rig and you can catch fish with. So, well, like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing, introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water, go out and catch some fish. Have a great day. See ya.